The grand ballroom of the royal palace glittered with the light of 1,000 candles. The floor was a mirror of polished marble, and the air was thick with the scent of roses and wine. It was a night of celebration, one that would seal a political alliance. Serafina, the princess of the kingdom of Celestia, was to announce her engagement to Prince Valen of Varys, an alliance that could shift the balance of power in the kingdom. Yet, despite the royal duties weighing heavily on her shoulders, Serafina could not stop thinking of the man she had once loved. It had been years since Lucian, the man who had once been everything to her, disappeared from her life without a trace. Once their love had been pure, untainted by the world around them. He was a prince just like her. They had been bound by promises made in the gardens of the palace, their laughter ringing in the halls like a song. But something had changed. One fateful night he had vanished. No explanation, no word, just an empty room and the scent of the roses they used to share. Now, Serafina was to marry another, but her heart was not hers to give. Every beat of it still belonged to Lucian, no matter how hard she tried. The memory of his warm smile, his gentle touch, and the way he made her feel like the most important person in the world haunted her. Tonight, in the grand ballroom, Serafina stood at the edge of a crowd of noblemen and women, the sounds of soft music filling the air. She was surrounded by the royalty and the elites of Celestia, her own people, but she felt alone. Alone in the way only someone who has lost their true love can feel. "Princess Serafina, may I have this dance?" Prince Valen's voice broke through her thoughts. His handsome face was kind, but there was a distant air about him, a politeness that did not reach his eyes. Serafina forced a smile, her heart sinking a little. "Of course," she replied, extending her hand. As they danced, the music played in a gentle waltz, but Serafina's mind was elsewhere. She tried to focus on the steps, on the rhythm of the music, but it was impossible. Her thoughts kept drifting back to Lucian, to the night he left, and to the months that followed when she had searched for him, only to find nothing. It was as if he had vanished into thin air, and then, as if the world had shifted around her, she felt it, a presence. The air seemed to thicken, and her heart skipped a beat. She turned her head slightly, just enough to catch the faintest glimpse of a shadow moving in the crowd. It was a figure standing near the entrance, tall and cloaked in a dark cape. The room seemed to part for him as though he carried a force that was both commanding and mysterious. Serafina's breath caught in her throat. It was impossible. No, it couldn't be him. But deep down she knew it was him. Lucian, the man she had once loved. Her hand trembled slightly in Prince Valen's grasp as she tried to steady herself. Could it be? After all these years? But what was he doing here? And why was he dressed as a commoner hiding in the shadows? Before she could fully process the scene, Prince Valen led her away, spinning her in the dance. But all she could think of was Lucian, his dark eyes, the way he always used to look at her as if she were his world. Now here he was, a stranger standing in the dim corner of the room. Her heart ached. Was this fate? Or had he returned for something darker? Was he seeking revenge? Serafina's thoughts were interrupted by a soft voice that reached her ear. "Could you dance with me? My ex is watching." The words were barely a whisper, almost drowned by the music, but they sent a jolt through her. She blinked, unsure whether she had heard correctly. Had someone else said that, or had her own mind conjured it up? She turned her head slowly, searching for the source of the voice. There, in the shadows, stood the man who had spoken, a figure taller than most, with a strikingly familiar face. His eyes, those same piercing dark eyes, locked with hers. Lucian. But how? Why was he here? Was he playing some sort of cruel game with her? Her breath hitched, and for a moment the room seemed to spin. She couldn't look away. He hadn't aged a day. He was the same man she had once known, the one who had stolen her heart and then disappeared without a word. "Dance with me," Lucian repeated softly, his voice low, almost pleading. For a moment, Serafina stood frozen, the words caught in her throat. She knew that she should refuse. She was engaged to Prince Valen, after all. But her heart was no longer her own. The memory of their past love, their laughter, and the promises they had made to each other flooded her senses. Everything in her wanted to run to him, to feel his arms around her again, to lose herself in the magic of their shared past. But the room, the world, was watching. It was a game of power and politics. If she danced with him now, what would it mean? Would it be a betrayal? And yet she knew that the question was impossible. She could not ignore the way her heart ached to be near him, even if it meant risking everything. Taking a deep breath, she nodded. "One dance," she whispered, her voice shaking slightly. The moment her hand touched his, a shiver ran through her body. The sensation of his touch, the familiarity, it was as if nothing had changed between them. It was as if they had never been apart. The music swirled around them, but to Serafina, the entire room faded away. She was lost in Lucian's presence, in the dark magnetism that he exuded. As they danced, she could feel the weight of his gaze on her, and yet there was a distance in his eyes. It was as if he was not quite the man he used to be, and the realization hit her like a cold wind. He was no longer the Lucian she had once known. He was something darker, harder, and perhaps more dangerous than ever. And then, as if reading her thoughts, Lucian spoke again, his voice barely audible over the music. "You have changed, Serafina." "So much has changed," she swallowed, unsure of how to respond. "And you haven't. You're still... you." A bitter smile tugged at the corner of his lips. "You have no idea how much I've changed." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. There was so much left unsaid, so many questions that Serafina was too afraid to ask. Where had he been all these years? Why had he left? And most of all, why was he here now? As the dance continued, time seemed to stretch and bend. For a brief moment, everything felt like it had before. She was in his arms and nothing else mattered. But deep inside, Serafina knew that this moment could not last. There was too much at stake. The music ended, but neither of them moved. Their eyes were locked, and for a fleeting second, it felt as though the world had stopped. But the moment was shattered when the doors to the ballroom burst open. A group of royal guards rushed in, and Serafina's father, King Aldrich, stood at the entrance, his eyes narrowing as he took in the scene. Lucian's expression hardened. Without a word, he stepped back, his gaze lingering on Serafina for just a moment longer before he disappeared into the crowd. Serafina stood there, breathless, her heart racing. She knew, deep in her bones, that nothing would ever be the same again. The echo of the royal guard's footsteps faded into the distance, but Serafina stood motionless, her heart still beating wildly from the moment she had shared with Lucian. The room had come alive again with the music, the laughter, and the chatter of the court. Yet, to Serafina, it all felt distant, like a dream she could not quite wake from. She could still feel the warmth of his touch on her skin, the weight of his gaze as they danced. The king, her father, stood at the entrance, his sharp eyes watching her with a mix of suspicion and concern. His presence was a reminder of the reality she could not escape. She was the princess of Celestia, bound by duty and the promises made long ago. And yet, the man she had once loved, the man who had disappeared from her life without a trace, had returned, and with him, the flood of emotions she had tried so hard to bury. Serafina turned slowly to face her father, forcing a smile as he approached. "Father," she greeted him softly, though her voice trembled slightly. King Aldrich's gaze was cold, but there was a hint of concern in his eyes. "Serafina, what was that?" "You danced with a stranger, and I saw the way he looked at you." Her chest tightened at his words. She knew what he meant. The man she had danced with was no stranger. He was Lucian, the lost prince of Celestia, and the man she had loved. The very man who had vanished years ago, leaving her broken. But how could she explain that to her father? How could she reveal the truth of the man she once knew when everything had changed? She began, but the words caught in her throat. How could she explain it? Lucian was not just a man from her past. He was now something darker, more dangerous, a force that threatened everything she held dear. "You should be careful, my daughter," the king said, his tone firm. There are rumors. That man is not who he once was. You must not let your heart lead you astray." Serafina nodded, her mind racing. She knew her father was right. Lucian had changed. He was not the same prince she had once known, but she could not help the way her heart still ached for him. No matter how much time passed, no matter how much distance was placed between them, the love she had for him remained, a quiet force that tugged at her soul. As the evening continued, Serafina found it impossible to focus on anything. Her mind kept drifting back to Lucian, to the way he had looked at her with that familiar intensity, the way their bodies had moved together as if no time had passed. She knew he was still here, somewhere in the palace, watching her. But what did he want? Why had he returned after all these years? Hours passed, and the ball slowly began to wind down. Serafina excused herself from Prince Valen, her fiancé, who had tried, albeit unsuccessfully, to keep the conversation going. She could not focus on him, not when Lucian was so close, not when her heart was torn in two. She made her way through the grand halls of the palace, her footsteps echoing in the silence. The torches along the walls flickered, casting dancing shadows on the stone floors. Serafina's heart raced as she turned a corner and found herself alone in the quiet wing of the palace. She paused, listening, trying to make sense of the emotions swirling inside her. It was then that she heard the faint sound of footsteps behind her. Her breath caught in her throat. Turning quickly, she found herself face to face with Lucian, his figure illuminated by the soft glow of the nearby torches. He stood there, his dark eyes locked on hers, his expression unreadable. "Serafina," he said softly, his voice carrying a weight of emotion that she could not ignore. Her heart skipped a beat at the sound of her name on his lips. It felt like a memory, one that was both painful and beautiful. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words failed her. How could she talk to him after everything that had happened? Lucian took a step closer, his presence overwhelming. "I didn't mean to cause you trouble," he said, his voice low. "But I couldn't stay away. Not from you." Serafina's chest tightened. "Why did you leave?" The question escaped her before she could stop it, her voice trembling. "Why did you leave me without a word, Lucian?" He seemed to flinch at her words, a shadow of regret passing over his face. "I had no choice," he murmured. "There were things I had to do, things I couldn't explain." His gaze softened. And for a moment, Serafina saw the man she had once known, the prince who had loved her with all his heart. "But I never stopped thinking about you." Serafina's heart twisted at his words. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to reach out and take his hand, to pull him into her arms and erase the pain of the past. But she couldn't. She was a princess now, and there were rules. There were duties. And Lucian. Lucian was no longer the prince she had known. He had become something else. Someone else. "I don't understand," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You disappeared. You left me when I needed you the most." "I know," he said, his voice rough. "And I regret it every day. But I didn't leave because I wanted to. I was forced to." Serafina's eyes searched his, trying to find the truth in them. "What do you want from me now, Lucian?" "Why are you here?" He paused, his gaze shifting toward the ground for a moment before he looked back at her. "I came back for you," he said quietly. "But not just for you. I came back to bring justice, to take back what was stolen from me, from both of us." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Serafina's heart raced as she tried to process what he was saying. Justice? What did that mean? What had happened to Lucian in the years since he left? "You're no longer the man I once knew," she said softly, though the words stung. "What have you become?" Lucian's eyes darkened. "I've become someone who will do whatever it takes to right the wrongs of the past, and I won't stop until I've done that." Serafina took a step back, her chest tightening with a mix of fear and longing. "I can't be a part of that, Lucian. I'm a princess. I have duties to my people." "I know," he said, "but you have to understand. This is bigger than us now. There's a storm coming, and I need you by my side. Whether you like it or not, our fates are tied together. You're the key to everything." His words were like a spell, wrapping around her heart, tugging her in a direction she didn't want to go. She knew he was right, in some way. But at what cost? "I don't know what you've become, Lucian," Serafina said, her voice trembling. "But I know I can't turn my back on my kingdom. I can't turn my back on everything I've worked for." Lucian reached out, his hand brushing against hers. "I never wanted to hurt you, Serafina," he whispered. "But I don't think we can avoid the storm any longer." The air between them crackled with unspoken tension. The past and present collided in a way that left Serafina breathless. She wanted to reach out to him to understand what had happened, but the fear of losing everything held her back. As she turned to walk away, Lucian's voice stopped her. "Serafina, please." She didn't turn back. Instead, she left him standing in the quiet corridor, her heart torn in two. The storm was coming, and she wasn't sure if she was ready to face it.